So picture this. You've got two canvas backpacks, right? Just sitting out in the open in a rural field in northern Serbia.
Yeah, just completely unassuming.
Exactly. I mean, if you drove past them, you wouldn't even look twice.
Yeah.
But inside those backpacks were massive quantities of explosives and commercial detonators.
Right.
And they were placed just a few hundred meters from this critical natural gas pipeline right near the Hungarian border.
Which is, I mean, what's really fascinating here is just that stark contrast between the physical threat and the political fallout, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Because we spend so much time discussing European energy security in terms of like policy papers or summit meetings and economic forecasts.
Right, the language is always so bureaucratic and dry.
Exactly. And then suddenly the vulnerability of this entire geopolitical strategy is just laid bare by a couple of bags dumped in the dirt.
It's wild. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a breaking report by Tim Lister, and we are really mapping out the shockwaves of this event.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
Because looking at those two backpacks in Serbia, it's actually the key to understanding a much larger, just incredibly volatile situation.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about European energy grids, a razor-thin national election, and these massive, shifting global alliances.
It really forces us to look at the actual physical infrastructure of international relations. I mean, this pipeline isn't just a conduit for fuel.
No, not at all.
It is the physical manifestation of a highly controversial foreign policy. I mean, it carries Russian gas right into a region that the European Union has spent, the last few years trying to isolate from Moscow's energy sector.
I always kind of think of this pipeline as like a geopolitical bypass valve.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Because while the rest of the continent is trying to shut down the main arteries of Russian energy, this specific pipe just allows those high-pressure political and economic ties to keep flowing directly into the heart of Central Europe.
Yeah, right into the center of it all.
So let's start right at the scene of the discovery, just to understand the mechanics of the immediate threat before we, trace those pipes all the way back to the capitals involved.
Makes sense.
So on Sunday, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić announced this discovery in the town of Konjica.
Which is strategically located right up against that northern border with Hungary.
Right. And the optics of the response here were just intense. The Serbian media immediately showed this heavy police presence, massive roadblocks.
Helicopters circling the area.
Yeah, exactly. And Vučić stated clearly that this could have endangered a lot of lives and caused devastating damage to the pipeline. But then he did something really interesting during his press conference.
Yeah, he did.
He mentioned that authorities had found certain traces regarding where the explosives came from, but then he just flat out refused to elaborate on what those traces actually were.
And see, that phrase is just, it's a masterclass in crisis communication.
Is it? Let's unpack that.
Well, yeah. When a head of state steps in front of the cameras while the helicopters are literally still in the air, every single word is doing heavy lifting.
But wait, just from a purely tactical standpoint, right? If you actually find forensic evidence, like detonator serial numbers or physical tracks or whatever,
right,
you don't broadcast that you have a lead. You keep quiet so you don't spook the network you're trying to roll up, right?
Usually, yeah.
So why even mention certain traces if you aren't going to show your hand? Like, how much of that is genuine operational security and how much is just controlling the narrative?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You're dealing with two completely different battlefields simultaneously here.
Okay.
You've got the forensic investigation on the ground, and then you have the public narrative. And in an information vacuum, panic and conspiracy theories spread way faster than the truth.
Oh, for sure.
So by announcing they have certain traces, the government is essentially asserting dominance over the narrative. It signals to the public that, hey, the state is competent, our intelligence apparatus is functioning.
Right, like we're on top of it.
Exactly. It says the situation, while dangerous, is being managed.
So it's almost like a placeholder. It tells everyone to hold their breath and just wait for the official story.
Precisely. And it provides immense strategic ambiguity for the leadership. I mean, they have essentially bought themselves time.
To do what, exactly?
Well, by keeping the nature of those traces incredibly vague, the Serbian and Hungarian governments give themselves the flexibility to attribute the attack later.
Ah, I see.
Right. They can wait and see how the political calculus shakes out. Like, is it a domestic extremist group, a foreign intelligence service, a rogue actor?
Right. They don't have to commit yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they still retain the authority of knowing something the public doesn't.
Which brings us to the obvious question of motive. I mean, to understand the threat, we have to look at the target.
Always.
Why hit the pipeline in Konjica? what makes this specific junction worth the huge operational risk of planting high explosives.
You really have to follow the gas here. I mean, the energy architecture of Europe has been fundamentally rewired over the past few years.
Yeah, completely overhauled.
The overarching directive of the European Union has been to aggressively decouple from Russian fossil fuels. We've seen, massive investments in liquefied natural gas terminals, new partnerships with Norway, the Middle East.
Just a collective continent-wide pivot, basically.
Exactly, except of course for Serbia and Hungary.
Right. They are sort of swimming upstream against this entire raging current of EU sanctions.
Yeah, they are the glaring holdouts. Both nations are heavily and intentionally reliant on Russian energy.
I mean, just last month, President Vucic secured another 3 months of Russian gas imports after having direct talks with Vladimir Putin.
Right.
And Hungary's position is even more structural, right?
Yeah.
Because as an EU member state, they aren't just quietly maintaining these legacy energy contracts.
No, they actually secured a formal exemption from the EU sanctions on Russian energy.
Wow.
Yeah, and they've actively used that loophole to deepen their dependence.
So to understand the mechanics of why Hungary would, isolate itself diplomatically just to keep that gas flowing, we really have to look at the economics.
Economics always drives it. Because while the rest of Europe is paying a premium to import LNG from across the ocean and build all this new infrastructure,
Hungary is just tapping into a pre-existing, heavily discounted supply line straight from Moscow.
exactly. And that arbitrage allows the Hungarian government to essentially subsidize domestic utility prices.
So the pipeline isn't just a vulnerability then. It's a political engine.
That's a great way to look at it.
Because cheaper gas translates directly to keeping voter utility bills artificially low.
It is basically the bedrock of Prime Minister Viktor Orban's domestic economic promise, which
Yeah.
is, why the rhetoric surrounding this infrastructure is so incredibly heated right now.
Right, and the timing is crazy because just one day before these explosives were found, so on Saturday, Orban released a video warning of an approaching severe energy crisis.
Yeah, he really leaned into that.
He pointed to the ongoing war in the Middle East and formally demanded that the European Union just suspend its sanctions on Russian energy imports.
He's essentially arguing that the global market is way too unstable right now for Europe to afford its moral stance on Russian gas.
And he's also been loudly complaining about Ukraine blocking oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline,
Right.
which is a whole separate Russian artery crossing Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, when you actually look at the map of these pipelines, you realize they are physical tethers. They tie Hungary and Serbia's economies directly to Moscow's energy sector.
Wow.
So if an adversary really wanted to inflict massive economic pain on those two countries or, punish them for bucking the European consensus, you don't attack them with a trade tariff.
No, you disrupt the physical flow of that cheap energy.
You target the steel pipes sitting in a Serbian field.
But the timing of this incident, that's what really elevates the stakes for me.
Yeah.
I mean, Orban called a Sunday Emergency Defense Council meeting in Budapest.
Right.
And that doesn't just happen because of an infrastructure threat. You really have to look at the calendar here. Hungary's parliamentary election is next weekend, April 12th.
And this is widely considered to be the most precarious moment of Orban's entire 16-year tenure.
The polling data is just fascinating. The center-right Tisa party is currently widening its lead over Orban's ruling Fidesz party.
Yeah, it's a really tight race.
But beneath those top-line numbers is the real story, right? The sheer volume of voters who haven't made up their minds yet.
Right. There is a massive block of the electorate that is entirely up for grabs in the final days of this campaign.
So what does this all mean for the voters? I mean, let's look at the psychology of the Hungarian electorate right now.
Okay.
You have an incumbent who has defined his leadership by promising stability and cheap energy. And suddenly you have a literal bomb threat against the primary mechanism of that cheap energy just days before the vote.
Wild timing.
Does a localized security crisis like this fracture an incumbent's base by highlighting their vulnerability, or does it solidify it?
Well, historically speaking, moments of acute national security stress almost always trigger a consolidation of power around the executive.
Like a rally around the flag effect.
Exactly. It literally changes the biological imperative of the voter. I mean, when the conversation is about inflation or public services, voters are pretty willing to entertain a change in leadership.
Right.
But when the conversation shifts to physical security and the very real threat of losing electricity or heating fuel, voter risk tolerance just plummet.
People want the person who already has the keys to the defense council room.
Exactly. When Orban convenes that emergency meeting, he is commanding the entire state apparatus. He is projecting strength and continuity.
And honestly, more importantly, the discovery of those explosives retroactively validates the exact narrative he was pushing the day before.
The video warning about the severe energy crisis?
Yes, he can pivot to the electorate and say, look, I warned you the system was under threat from external forces, and here is the physical proof.
It is an incredibly powerful rhetorical tool. I mean, it forces the opposition party to react to a national security event completely on the incumbent's terms.
Which effectively hijacks the final week of the campaign narrative.
Totally. It turns a debate about 16 years of domestic policy into a single-issue referendum on who can protect the power grid.
Wow. But it's not just the voters in Budapest who are sweating the math on this election. The geopolitical ramifications of Orban's potential survival or defeat are massive.
Oh, huge, because he is running a very specific high-wire foreign policy.
Right. And I want to pause here and explicitly state to you, the listener, that we are simply mapping out the political realities and alliances as they're presented in our source material.
Right. We're just looking at the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing any right-wing, left-wing, EU, or U.S. viewpoints here. We just want to report on the facts of these alignments impartially.
Absolutely. So looking objectively at his strategy, he has systematically positioned Hungary as the primary friction point within Western alliances.
Yeah, let's map out that geopolitical math. Orban has spent years aggressively challenging the European Union's institutional consensus.
Right.
He regularly blocks or delays EU financial and military support for Ukraine. He fights Brussels over immigration quotas and judicial reforms. He is openly defiant of the European establishment next door.
But simultaneously, he has cultivated this incredibly deep, active alliance with the political right in the United States.
It's a strategy of, asymmetric alliances.
That's exactly what it is.
And it's playing out in real time. Literally this week, during the climax of this election, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is scheduled to be in Budapest meeting with Orban.
Yeah, the timing is no accident.
And a few months ago, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood at a news conference and declared that relations between Washington and Budapest were in a golden age.
He told Orban flat out, your success is our success.
So why does a country of roughly 10 million people command that kind of attention from a global superpower?
Well, you have to look at the utility they provide each other. For the current U.S. administration, Orban represents an ideological foothold in Central Europe.
Okay.
He's a leader who shares their specific views on nationalism, borders, and, a general skepticism of international organizations like the EU.
But what is Orban getting out of it? Why does a landlocked European prime minister need a golden age with Washington?
Because it acts as a massive geopolitical counterweight. I mean, think about it. If you are constantly antagonizing the massive political and economic bloc right next door to you, the European Union, you need a very powerful friend to insulate you from the blowback.
Right. So when Brussels threatens to withhold institutional funding or penalizes Hungary for its Russian energy reliance,
Orban can leverage his relationship with Washington. Having the U.S. Secretary of State publicly align with your success provides just a massive layer of diplomatic armor.
it's incredible leverage. He's using a transatlantic alliance to effectively veto pressure from his own geographic neighbors.
Yeah. But, and this is the key point, the entire architecture of that strategy, the defiance of Brussels, the pipeline deals with Moscow, the ideological partnership with Washington, it all rests entirely on his ability to win elections.
Right. So if the TISA party actually captures those undecided voters on April 12th,
That entire multi-vector foreign policy collapses overnight.
the whole chessboard gets flipped.
Completely. The EU regains a cooperative member state, the U.S. loses its primary ideological partner in the region, and Russia potentially loses its most reliable energy customer inside European borders.
Which is exactly why the discovery of those explosives near Konjiza isn't just some local police matter.
No, not at all. Every major intelligence service and foreign ministry is watching how this incident impacts the polling data. The global stakes are just astronomical.
It really emphasizes how interconnected this whole system is. I mean, we started this deep dive by looking at a localized police response to 2 canvas bags in the dirt. But just by following the physical infrastructure of that pipeline, we've traced the flow of Russian gas through the Balkans, explored the economic loopholes of the European Union.
We analyzed the psychological mechanics of a razor-tight election.
Exactly, and unpacked a transatlantic alliance designed to reshape the balance of power in Europe.
It just goes to show that in the modern era, geography really does still dictate destiny. We operate under this illusion that global affairs are driven entirely by, digital networks and abstract treaties.
And to you listening to this, thank you for taking the time to truly explore the mechanisms behind these headlines.
Yeah, it's so important.
It's just so easy to see a news alert about a foiled sabotage plot, assume it's another chaotic event in a distant country, and just move on.
Oh, absolutely.
But by actually taking the time to understand the energy dependencies, the crisis communication tactics, and the geopolitical leverage at play, you are building a much more accurate model of how the world actually works.
I want to leave you with one final thought to consider as you watch this situation unfold over the coming days.
Yeah, please.
Building on our discussion of how power is projected and protected, I want you to really think about the immense fragility of the modern geopolitical order.
Because we treat global stability like it's set in stone, don't we?
We do. We analyze billion-dollar defense budgets, we debate the intricacies of international law, and we watch world leaders negotiate at these heavily fortified summits.
Right.
We build these massive theoretical frameworks of deterrence and alliance, but ultimately, the stability of entire governments, the warmth of millions of homes, and the balance of global power,
Yeah.
it can rely entirely on the physical integrity of a steel pipe.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there, running miles and miles through the wilderness, completely exposed to the elements, and to anyone willing to walk right up to it.
The grandest strategies eventually have to touch the ground. Well, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Catch you next time.